Okay, so I know like this shouldn't matter, and usually it does not matter to me. Like I make it a point not to talk about this stuff, but like I'm hyper aware of the fact that this isn't the most visually pleasing video that I've ever made, but I think like the words make up for it. The intellect that comes out of my mouth is really worth listening to, and I hope that that doesn't, like, the camera work and messy hair does not detract or distract from the really positive lessons that I hope everyone can learn from Marcus Aurelius. So yeah, enjoy the video, and apologies, it's been a long day and it was really fun to talk about this, but I'm just simply not willing to film a third time because I feel like I articulated things really well, and the filming is not very good, and I'm sorry that the lighting and the filming and the me is not looking great, but anyway, shouldn't matter. Anyway, enjoy. Hello friends, hope you're doing well today. Today I want to talk to you about how to live a good life, which is something everybody wants to know, right? And I'm mainly going to be referring to Marcus Aurelius and the Meditations, which is a personal journal that he kept. So if you don't know who Marcus Aurelius is, he's a Roman emperor who was writing in the 1st century AD, so literally 2,000 years ago. This guy was writing about his job and his life and his relations to other people and about the universe and existence and all of his beliefs, basically. And yeah, I think he had a really awesome philosophy, one that kind of coincides a lot with Stoicism, but it's kind of also his own thing, and I think we have a lot to learn from him and from reading the Meditations. And so since I've read this book twice so far in the year of 2019, and I intend on reading it at least a few more times in the year of 2019, I thought I would share with you guys some of the stuff that I think we can learn from him. If I look off the camera, I'm going to be looking at my notes because I did prepare a lot to make this video. So yeah, let's just begin. The first lesson I think we can learn is that of gratitude. And this is the lesson that we are first met with when we open the book, because literally the first book or the first chapter of the Meditations is just a list of people that Marcus Aurelius was grateful for and that he felt that he learned a lot from. And so it's really kind of heartwarming. And later on in the book, in chapter 6, he writes that when you want to gladden your heart, think of the good qualities in the people around you. And that's exactly how he starts off the book. Although, I mean, it's possible and it's very likely that this chapter, the first chapter, was actually written at the very end of the chronology of the book. But I'm not going to bore you guys with the chronology and that kind of thing. But yeah, you should know that the whole Meditations, it's really not written in any particular thematic order. It's just, it's a personal journal, so it's probably chronologically written. And yeah, he's writing it at the end of his life, so he's kind of reflecting on all the things that he learned in life, but at the same time, he wasn't really organized at all. And he definitely, just keep in mind as well, he's not a philosopher. He's just a person. He's just a human who had a job, very important job, to be emperor of Rome in a very, well, I don't know too much about the history, but I assume his job was very difficult. So these are his reflections on how to stay grounded in this chaos, basically. So yeah, the first lesson we can learn is gratitude. I think it's one of the most important lessons of life. It's one of the most important lessons I learned in the year of 2018, and I'm still learning it over and over. But yes, so gratitude. Second of all, I think we can learn that events in themselves are not bad or good, but it's our judgments of events that are either good or bad. And so this is a very Stoic idea. It shows up in all of the Stoic philosophers, and especially in Epictetus, but it's the whole idea that we are in control of our perception. And so when something happens and we are upset by it, it's not the thing that happened that upset us, it is our judgment of the thing that happened as bad that upset us. And so he writes that things have not the slightest hold on our soul, nor do they have access to the soul, nor can they alter or move it, but the soul alone alters and moves itself. And so if you are in control of your soul, which you are, you can choose not to be moved by certain things. And there's this kind of like conception of Stoic philosophy that's like, oh, be a Stoic, like be this like stone rock hard person who isn't affected by anything. And that's not what Stoic philosophy is, but I think that's where this conception comes from. The idea that we shouldn't be affected by the external things, that in reality we aren't, but we are only affected by our own judgments of those external things. Another quotation I really love is this dialogue. Unfortunate I am that this has befallen me. And then he writes, no, quite the contrary. Fortunate I am that when such a thing has befallen me, I remain undisturbed, neither crushed by the present nor afraid of what is to come. And so there's this idea, again, that where you can perceive something as an unfortunate thing, you can also equally have control in perceiving it as a fortunate thing, that you have, gotten through something difficult. Third of all, he reminds us of the nature of life, which is ephemeral and ever-changing, and he relates it a lot to this image of the stream flowing. So he writes, substance is like a river in perpetual flow, and its activities are forever changing. He writes that the earth in its entirety is merely a point in space, and how very small this corner in which we have our dwelling. And so he just reminds us of this like view from above, this existential view of the universe and our place in it as just this tiny point. And I think this is him trying to remind himself that even though he's this like emperor, and I'm sure a lot of people will come up to him and praise him for doing his job, that he is insignificant, just as insignificant as anything is, really, and that basically we just have to remember that everything is going to go away eventually, and nothing is permanent, everything is ephemeral. And so in this stream of things entering and leaving being, and time, which he describes as a raging torrent, which I love that image, he says, like, how foolish is it to live with pride or to be upset at things that are happening, because everything is always changing. Like, there's no reason to be upset. There's reason to take charge of the present moment and just enjoy what you can of life, and of the nature of life, and appreciate it for what it is. On that note, his view towards death is very similar. It's as a natural and necessary part of life, and this is a very like Epicurean perspective as well, although the Stoics and the Epicureans were like they had very different philosophies. They did agree on this point of like death is natural, it's necessary, and there's no reason to be afraid of it, there's no reason to be upset by it, there's no reason to judge it as something bad. Death is necessary for life, and anything that is necessary and natural for Marcus Aurelius is good. And so yeah, he thinks of death as a rest. He thinks that it doesn't matter whether you've had a long or a short life, and that death is never like a bad thing, whether or not you've had a long or short life. Like, death actually is the same for everyone, because everything that anyone loses is always going to be the same, which is the present moment. That's all we're going to lose, just the present moment. So that's kind of cool. I like that perspective, and I think it's an important lesson, which, I mean, it's one thing to be like intellectually agreeing with him, but it's a very different thing to actually put that in practice and say like, oh yeah, I have understood this lesson. You know, that's another thing with Stoic philosophy. It's a very practical philosophy, and so like the only way you can really be sure that you know or understand what they're saying is to live that philosophy. And I don't know if I can live the philosophy of like, oh, I'm not afraid of death. Death is natural and necessary, but I'm definitely trying. Like, death as natural and necessary. It's a good lesson to learn. Okay. Number 5. The lesson to work hard and try to enjoy our duties as humans. He had a very difficult job being the emperor of Rome and make really difficult decisions on a daily basis. And so I feel like this is coming from him in that position to encourage himself. He's writing to himself to encourage himself to devote his whole being to his work and to find it fulfilling and to enjoy it as much as he can. There's this really great passage in chapter 5, the first passage of chapter 5, which describes him early in the morning, how he is finding it so hard to wake himself up and to get to work. And he's like, there's this like dialogue basically going on in his head where one side of him is like, I should tell myself I'm rising to do the work of a human being, and no other creature and no other part of nature questions their work as the being that they are, right? The spiders, the bees, the ants, they all get up and do their work. They don't question it. Humans, for some reason, are over here trying to rest and procrastinate and just live their life for pleasure, and that's not right. So he's saying that we weren't made to lie under the covers and rest eternally. Like, nature put a limit on rest, just as it put a limit on drinking and eating. And so you've taken your rest, and now it's time to get to work. You know, go be a human. Go do human work. And I love it. It's really difficult. It's definitely something that, you know, I want to improve my work ethic, and I think he has a really good work ethic, and he has a really like encouraging way of putting it. He's talking to himself. This was never intended to be published, so he's encouraging himself to do the work of a human and not be discouraged or lose heart when tasks are difficult, because everything that we were given, we're able to get through. Number 6, to prepare ourselves for future evils and not expect things to go as planned. So expectation is basically planned disappointment. This is a lesson I've learned. The Stoics taught me this, but also life keeps teaching me this. But he has this really great passage in the second book, in the second chapter of the book, which basically goes, say to yourself at the start of the day, I shall meet with meddling, ungrateful, violent, treacherous, vicious, envious, unsociable people. And so, yeah, he's basically saying, like, expect the worst from people. And then when you meet with them, you will be pleasantly surprised if they're not any of those things. But if they are, that's fine. I'm sorry about the background noises, by the way. My heater is freaking out. So, yeah, he's just saying, you aren't better than them, and they aren't worse than you for being this way. They are merely ignorant of the ways to be good. And yeah, just try to understand where they're coming from, really. Like, don't get all bogged up about it. Don't expect people to be amazing to you, you know, just behave in a way that you believe is good and expect the worst from people, and then life will be pleasant because you'll know you're doing your job as you should be. You'll know that your behavior is as it should be, and you'll accept the fact that other people's behavior might be unsociable or vicious or treacherous or envious or ungrateful or violent or meddling, and that's their problem. Which goes perfectly into the 7th point, which is we need not concern ourselves with the actions of other people. This comes up again and again in the meditations. He's like, don't waste your time thinking about what someone else is doing and judging them and thinking about how you could do it better, or they should be doing it better, or I know better for them. Like, that's not useful. What's useful is for you to focus on you and live your best life. And maybe people can follow by example, but that's up to them. And if everyone just focused on themselves and making themselves the best that they can be, the world would be a better place. Meddling is not the answer, basically. So yeah, that's number 7. Number 8 is to stand firm and strong and know that we can choose who we become and to train ourselves. So there's this idea of like training ourselves to be like the headland with wave after wave breaking against it, which yet stands firm, which is quite a pleasing image to my mind because I love the sea, and to be like a stone, a rock that won't be broken by wave after wave crashing against it, because that's what life is. Life is just wave after wave of disappointment, of hardship, of trauma a lot of the time, and yet we can stand strong, and no one can prevent us from living our best lives. And we have to just remind ourselves of all the things that we've endured and move forward stronger than we were before, which is just a really beautiful lesson, I think. Number 9 is that things are not what they seem. Ooh, very mystical. He talks a lot from the perspective of the universe, as I mentioned before, and he also talks a lot from the perspective of like a very scientific mind, which I find so interesting. So he uses this like method of deconstructing like the elements that make something up to... Whoa, sorry. Doggies. Okay. So yeah, he uses this like method of looking at something and analyzing it from a very scientific perspective in order to understand it for what it really is as opposed to what it seems. So he's like, all these luxuries we have, all this like luxury of, oh, I want this like fancy dinner, or oh, I want this like fancy X, Y, Z, whatever. And he's like, think about what it really is. Like, what do you really want? So like, oh, I want a new laptop. What do you really want? You want a piece of metal and a bunch of circuits, and, you know, like, what do you really want when you want a fine dinner? You want like a dead pig on your plate, or this purple robe that looks amazing, some sheep's wool dipped in the blood of a shellfish. Like, he just was looking at things from a very specific perspective. So he writes that sexual intercourse is just the friction of a piece of gut and, following a sort of convulsion, the expulsion of some mucus. I think that's so funny, like the way that he describes it. And he just thinks that we can see to the heart of things as they truly are when we look at things in this way. And so don't be fooled, don't be drawn in by like your emotions and your pride and your desires, because usually they're tricking you into thinking something is better than it is. All that fine wine is just grape juice. Like, just think about things on a more elemental level and don't be carried away by your impressions. Finally, number 10, the importance of philosophy, of meditation, of mindfulness for the soul. So yeah, the whole meditations is kind of a great example of this, but he specifically talks about how philosophy is our guide when life is just oblivion and chaos, and when we don't feel like we have a place in the universe. Philosophy and mindfulness and meditating on ourselves and looking inwards, that's the way we're gonna find our way and live a good life, basically. So there's this great analogy that some of the Stoics use, and he uses as well, which is that as doctors always keep their knives and instruments at hand to deal with urgent cases, so you too should keep your doctrines at the ready to enable you to understand things divine and human as one who is mindful of the bond that unites the two realms. So he's just saying basically that your doctrines, your perceptions, your beliefs, these are the things that are going to keep you grounded, and these are the things that are going to allow you to have a good life. Just as a doctor has their instruments, you have your mental capacity to do what you want to do and live a good life and have conceptions that allow your soul to flourish and reach contentness of mind. So yeah, okay, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I love it. It's so well written. He's like definitely the best writer of all the Stoics in my opinion. And yeah, he's just really great at metaphors and analogies and putting things in a certain way. But just do note that he's not a philosopher, first of all, so rational arguments are not really his forte. And second of all, this whole idea that the way that a philosophy book might be written should be in a certain way, like this is a journal, it's a personal journal, just keep in mind when you're reading it that he's writing to himself and that these are kind of like very disparate thoughts that he has, and they do follow certain themes, but I mean, I went through and I tried to thematically categorize them and organize quotations and stuff, but when you're reading it, it's just a bunch of different ideas being thrown at you. But I love it. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon with another video. Goodbye.